One thing I will say is when a postpartum mom comes in and she's like, I don't feel like myself. I don't recognize who's in the mirror in front of me. And I can see that it's really bothering them. If they're a candidate, I will say, have you ever thought about a sprinkle of Botox? Because it just opens everything up. It gives you that like well-rested appearance without actually being well-rested.
I'm Susan Yara, and welcome to My Life Online. We're gonna have a lot of fun and learn a lot together. Today's guest is Amy Koberling. She's a practicing dermatology PA, meaning that she does injectables and other cosmetic treatments at a dermatologist's office. She's also a skincare educator and a beauty content creator. I also know her as The Skin Enthusiast, which is the name of her podcast and blog. We also just have a really funny story about how we met and became friends and just started working together in this industry. But the main reason why I'm bringing Amy onto this episode is to talk about cosmetic procedures postpartum, after you have had your baby, because I think this is a time when our faces completely change. Obviously, our bodies change too, but you have such a different perspective when you yourself have become a mom and gone through this experience. So I wanted to hear her perspective as someone who has had her own baby, has gone through this exact experience, and now how she treats her patients as they come in as new moms. And by the way, if you love the topic of cosmetic treatments, I just did an episode with Amy on her podcast called The Skin Enthusiast, where she talked to me about some of the cosmetic treatments that I've done over the years and the pros and cons and my regrets and just the things that I loved, all the feelings that I had about these cosmetic treatments. So definitely go give that a listen as well. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Tell everybody a little bit about your career.
Yeah, so I'm a cosmetic dermatology PA by trade, but I spend the majority of my time educating about skincare and social media. So I actually started my career as a critical care PA. So I worked in the ICU for a few years, always with the intention of going into dermatology. That was always my dream. But for those who don't know anything about PA and PA school, it's a relatively short track. So after your 4 years of undergrad, it's a 2-year master's program. So 2 years is not a lot of time to learn everything you need to learn. So I kind of made the decision early on that I was going to go into some more general medicine. A job opening kind of happened serendipitously, and my boss knew the owner of this clinic, and it's Dr. Leslie Bauman's clinic. She's a renowned dermatologist. She's probably one of the most famous cosmetic dermatologists. She really she wrote the textbook on it. She really started it. When a PA position opened up in her office, I said, I have to go now. I remember I was at a 30th birthday party weekend, and my husband's boss called me and is like, this position opened up. You need to send over your resume right now. So I'm editing my resume on my phone. And I remember I went to the interview and there was a typo circled on the resume because I was literally on the
You actually saw it. Did that get you jittery?
Oh my gosh. As my type of personality, that killed me. The whole rest of the interview, all I could think about was that there was a typo on my CV. But it all worked out. It's been the best. I'm still there one day a week. I love it. I had a fashion blog, actually, a style blog when I was working in the ICU. It was my creative outlet. And I would talk about skincare because I'd always been passionate about it. And then once I started becoming more knowledgeable in the space and was treating patients, I started to kind of pivot to more educational skincare content. And that's kind of what took off. And then the Instagram became the TikTok and the YouTube and now the podcast. And it just kind of has snowballed. And it's been amazing. I'm so happy. I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
So I was saying in the intro that we have a really funny way that we met. And it has a lot to do with your blog name, your podcast name, called The Skin Enthusiast, right? Do you want to tell the story? I actually love to hear the story from your perspective.
Okay. I'm going to get all my rosacea is going to fall. Okay.
No, this is how we met. And it's, I think it's a very unique story.
Yeah, unique is a good word for it. So I had the blog. It was called The Skin Enthusiast blog. My name was The Skin Enthusiast on social media. And for a couple of years, my husband had been on me to trademark it. And every time I would go to do it, I was like, oh, it's $500. I don't want to spend the money. Now I trademark everything. If I have an idea, I'm I don't care. I'll trademark it. At the time, it was a lot of money for me. I didn't want to invest in it. And so finally, I go on. I'm okay, today is the day I'm going to finally file for this trademark. I go on, type it into the U.S. task force, and it says Skin Enthusiast filed 7 days prior. Someone else had filed for the trademark 7 days prior. And I am just immediately panicking. I'm oh my God, my husband's going to kill me. And I go click through and it says mixed makeup. And immediately I'm oh, I know that name. And so I look on and I'm oh no, it's
the skincare influencer.
Yes. I'm screwed. I'm going to have to change all my socials. I can't use this. So I had a trademark attorney for another reason. And I asked her, and she was no, you've been using it for a long time. It's worth us contacting them. So she sent a very direct cease and desist to Susan Yara, like, just want to melt. Oh my God, I cannot believe that. Now
that was a very stern.
Yes.
It was rude.
And we didn't know each other.
Yeah, we didn't know each other.
At all. We had never had any conversation. So Susan was very gracious. A couple weeks later, I think you kind of like DM'd me and was like, listen, can we just like chat about this? And I'm like, yes, please. And I was, you know, like I was a wreck this whole time, just like stomach in knots. Like this was it was like the first time in my career anything like this had ever happened. I had never been faced with anything like that before, and it just felt very stressful to me. But you were so kind on the call, and you basically were like, we only talked about it for a bit, and then you were like, let's do something together. Like, let's work together or something. So you graciously gave up the domain that you had bought because she had already purchased skinthusiast.com, which was, I think probably what happened was when I went to purchase it, it was a high price, and I probably said no.
Yeah, I think I spent like $2,000,
it was expensive.
on it.
And I probably looked at that and was like, no, I'll just do the Skin Enthusiast blog. Again, this is very early. Like, I'm not really business minded at that point yet. And so she gave it to me, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So I think the funny thing about the story is that I think it's easy to think like, because we see these stories, right? Like we saw like with Rose and all that, like there's these fights that start happening and people don't want to give up these trademarks and everything. I am just an opportunistic person. I don't even know why I was looking up Skin Enthusiast, but I saw that the domain was available and the trademark was available. And I was like, I have no intention to use this, but it's a great, like for somebody in the skincare industry, this is a great trademark. And how often do you get the website also? So I was like, well, shoot, let's go ahead and do this. I don't care if this is going to cost a few $1,000s, because now I know I've been in the industry now long enough. As you said, now you just trademark everything that you come up with. So I was like, okay, let's just follow this. So I had zero intentions of it. I just thought it was cute. And then I get this cease and desist, and I was like, this is so like intense. And then I start talking to you and I start looking at her social media, and I was like, she's cute. Like, I think I'd be friends with her. And I was like, you know, I'm going to chance it. I'm going to hope that she's a nice person. I'm just going to message her and be like, let's be besties. Let's be friends. Which I think like at first felt like you weren't sure what the catch was, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think just because you guys were already so big, and I was just kind of entering into my career in a space where like I had been burned one time before, and I was just like a little cautious, you know? And I mean, thankfully it all worked out really well.
And you ended up becoming one of my clients, one of my talent clients, which no longer, now you've moved on with the group to TDD, but we got to work with each other for a little while there and became friends. Well, I think one of the biggest things I've seen with you over the years that we've known each other now is that you have become a mom. And I feel like for me, when I became a mom, I really saw this transition for myself in the kinds of, and not just my skincare routine, but the kind of cosmetic treatments I was interested in. And I even look back on some of the mistakes I made. For instance, I feel like right after I had my first baby, I saw my face change so much when I started losing weight that I think I got too much stuff done. At one time. And then I didn't look like myself at all, in my opinion. So then I was like, okay, let's like take it back. And then I found that balance. So I would love to hear from you as a cosmetic injector, as a person who really understands skincare and educates, and now as a mom also. What would you say women should be thinking about after they have a baby? Maybe even actually, let's take it from start of pregnancy, because I feel like sometimes we let things go too long during the pregnancy thinking we can't do anything.
Yes. I think that's a huge misconception about pregnancy. I get so many panicked DMs about what you can and can't use in pregnancy. And the reality is most of what you're using, you can continue. So we don't want to be using retinoids. That's really like an abundance of caution, because we know the really high strength, the oral forms can cause issues. And then we just kind of like trickle that down to even retinol. I know people who use retinol in pregnancy. I didn't, because I'm a worrywart. And then to me, it's like, it's not worth it. So we recommend no retinol in pregnancy, no hydroquinone, no high strength acids like chemical peels in the office. But the majority of what you're using is safe. And I wish more people understood that, because I think it's a source of fear for moms. Like you're all of a sudden you're pregnant, you want to do absolutely everything you can for this little baby. But in reality, the skincare doesn't need to change that much. But I would say like, just start thinking about it while you're pregnant, start prioritizing prevention. mentioned, tinted sunscreen every day, wear your vitamin C. We know that there are some things that can happen in pregnancy, like melasma. And unfortunately, once that happens, it's like a lifelong battle. It happens to so many of us. It's so common, so don't stress out. But the more we can prevent some of these issues, the better. I also see a lot of pregnancy acne, so you might find that you have to change some stuff in there. I love like a benzoyl peroxide cleanser for acne because you're not going to be able to use your prescription retinoids. So just don't, I think it's important not to completely fall off in pregnancy because you're going to set yourself up for success if you kind of stay consistent with your skincare while you're pregnant.
Because that is what happens. They're kind of like, you know what, I'm just going to let it happen while I'm pregnant. Let this melasma and the hyperpigmentation get really bad and I'll just deal with it afterwards. But then they have to go backwards then and get rid of it. And that's harder.
As you know, dealing with it is really not that easy. Like it's a chronic condition. It ebbs and flows. It will never fully go away, really.
Once the baby is out, do they just add all their skincare back in?
So you can restart your retinoid, which is a common misconception. People think you can't while you're breastfeeding, but you can. Again, the risk of retinoids while you're pregnant is a risk of birth defects, which is still extremely rare. Like it doesn't really happen in the low doses, but that's why we don't use it. But once you're breastfeeding, the baby's here. We don't have to worry about that anymore. As long as you're not applying it directly to a place that the baby's going
like your nips.
Yes, like your nipples. It's fine. So you can add back in your retinoid. You're still going to want to hold off on things like hydroquinone until after, but you can go see your provider then at that point if you're interested. I always say like, don't feel pressure that all of a sudden the baby's here and you need to go see your cosmetic provider and like see what you can do. If you're not in that headspace and you don't care about it, like take a beat. That's totally fine. But if it's something that's stressing you out, you can go in and have a conversation.
Yeah. I look back on my first pregnancy and I didn't do anything during the pregnancy, after the pregnancy, probably for like a year. And then at that year mark, I just started going hard.
Yes.
And I regret that instead of going slowly. So after my second pregnancy, I think I was at 3 months postpartum and I was like Botox, all the retinoids, like everything. Even while I was breastfeeding, I went ahead and I went for it.
I did too. But one thing I will say is when a postpartum mom comes in and she's like, I don't feel like myself. I don't recognize who's in the mirror in front of me. And I can see that it's really bothering them. If they're a candidate, I will say, have you ever thought about a sprinkle of Botox? Because it just opens everything up. It gives you that like well-rested appearance without actually being well-rested. And in my experience, it's kind of like it's an easy entry in addition to your skincare that you can add on that is going to make a difference and just make you feel like yourself a little bit again. And that's like what we want, right? Like our world has been turned upside down in the best way possible, but it's like an identity crisis early on, especially your first baby. Yeah. So just feeling like yourself again is so helpful.
Well, so a couple of things. One, I think a lot of women think they can't do Botox while they're breastfeeding. So what are your thoughts on that? The second thought though, is I think they're afraid they're going to look extremely different. If they've never done Botox before, they're going to look extremely different if they go and get like their 11s done or some crow's feet. Yeah. What do you say to that?
So if it's done correctly, and Botox is one of like the easier procedures. Now there's some nuance to that, right? Not everyone's muscles are the same. You really have to, you have to take an artful approach. But for most people, if it's done well, you're still going to look like yourself. You're just going to be refreshed. It's not filler. It's not going to change the shape of your face. It's simply smoothing out some muscle movement. And as far as breastfeeding, a lot of providers won't do it. Myself included, I have to read the patient. Like if they're a nervous Nelly, I won't do it and I'll tell them why. I'll be honest and say, listen, this is safe. There's no studies or data to indicate that it's unsafe for the baby breastfeeding when you get your Botox. However, what if your baby gets sick tomorrow? What if something happens? You're always going to wonder, was it the Botox? And that's, if they just have that personality, I'm like, trust me, it's better for you to wait. But if there's someone who's not really nervous about things, I'll even show them like on LactMed, which is a database we use to know if medications are safe during breastfeeding. I'll show them that. I'll kind of give them the decision, let them make the decision. But there was actually a case report of a woman who had botulism poisoning, and that wasn't even in her breast milk. So the small amount of purified toxin that we're injecting into your muscle is not getting into the breast milk.
Right. Okay. So Botox, probably one of the first things.
Yeah.
Make you look more awake, you look less tired.
Yeah. And I mean, we can't generalize. Everyone's different in what they need, but I think that's just really easy. It's quick. No downtime. It's just like a good pick-me-up in addition to just getting back on your regular skincare. Okay. Again, if you're in the headspace. If you're not in the headspace, don't worry about it.
Yeah. If they have melasma.
Yes. So that we can start treating with like non-hydroquinone skin brighteners. We can get you on your retinol. Make sure you're using your tinted sunscreen while you're breastfeeding.
You keep saying tinted sunscreen. Tell everybody why specifically the tinted sunscreen.
So tint is important because the ingredients that tint our products, whether it be foundation or sunscreen, are iron oxides, as you know. And And those give us visible light protection. And visible light is known to make hyperpigmentation worse. So if you have any sort of hyperpigmentation, whether it be like old acne marks, melasma, not only do you want sunscreen for the broad spectrum UV protection, but you want that additional visible light protection. So for me, that looks like a tinted sunscreen. For other people, it might be your favorite sunscreen with a skin tint on top, and that's fine too. As long as you're getting SPF and tint, that's what's important when you have hyperpigmentation. That will make sure that you're doing all those things right. And then after breastfeeding, if we still feel like we need a prescription option, we can look at something like hydroquinone for a short period of time.
After breastfeeding?
After breastfeeding, yeah.
Okay, so let's say they've graduated to the Botox and everything. They've got their skincare. Now what? You know, like they're losing all that baby weight. Because it's so crazy how you might not lose the baby weight on your body. I still haven't lost some of that baby weight in certain areas. You lose it in your face really fast.
Yeah, it's really odd. And I feel like you don't really understand it until you've gone through it. But for me, once I was back to my pre-pregnancy weight and actually my body felt the same, my face was so different. Like my face was a lot thinner. Like the skin just wasn't as plump as it used to be. And I'm really a fan, I know we talked about this a little bit off air, is of biostimulators, especially in this young group. Like I'm not going to jump to fillers depending on the person.
And when you say fillers, like the HA, the hyaluronic
acid fillers, I think I like moved away from them a lot now, especially in really young people. I truly believe all of this is safe. That's what the data is telling us. But we just don't know if you start in your 20s putting filler in your face, what are you going to look like when you're 60 or 70? That's something we haven't really seen yet, right? Especially just starting so young.
Well, I can tell you as somebody who's been getting filler in my face for about almost 2 decades.
Yeah. And you look amazing, but you've done a lot of like
removing the filler. And we've now started having conversations about just that the technique was so different when I started. So it's probably been about like 12, 13 years since I started really doing filler. And we think that like there's deep filler back there that like maybe I've never even been able to get rid of because the techniques were just so different.
So different. And thankfully, you know, we have options that we can, you know, quote unquote, melt some of this stuff. But I usually will start with some sort of a biostimulator or even just like a microneedling. I mean, 3 to 4 sessions of microneedling increases your collagen. You get a 400% increase in collagen.
Right.
That's a huge number for something like a microneedling pen. So I usually will start with those things, especially if they're kind of just getting started and they're a little bit younger.
Okay. So and when you say a little bit younger, like maybe like a mom who's like 30.
Yeah. In their early 30s, I think. And especially if it's something that they haven't dipped their toes in yet. Because the last thing you want when you're a new mom is to go home and not recognize yourself. I mean, or just be like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? Like it's a very difficult time mentally, I think. There's just a lot happening. I think less is more.
I agree. And just going slowly with it.
Yes, go slowly.
You know what I did that I was so happy with, but I probably did a little too much. Right after I had my first baby, I start to lose that fat in my face. I realized I had gotten these pregnancy lips.
Oh my gosh, yes.
My lips were so pretty when I was pregnant that I was like, they're going away. Wait, I want those lips back. So the first thing I went and did, besides Botox, was I got filler in my lips for the very first time.
Interesting.
And I probably went a little too big at that time.
Well,
I was like, give them to me, give me those pregnancy lips. But I was so happy with that.
Yeah.
Just to kind of replicate that look.
Yes, I'm with you. The pregnancy lips are so like juicy and plump. I think that's a pretty common request after a pregnancy.
It's like, oh, I just want that. That and the boobs that you get when you're breastfeeding.
I know. And you're like, oh, they're not going to go away.
Without the veins.
Or the pain and tenderness.
And you were saying the biostimulators. What's your favorite?
I like Sculptra. Just like, I love the way it kind of like lays a framework for those fibroblasts to come in and create our own collagen. I think that's really the way of the future. Whatever can stimulate our own skin to make the good stuff. I think that's kind of where we're headed.
Yeah. Instead of having something that's fake in there. That's not a bad thing.
No,
it has its place.
It has its place 100%. But I think we're evolving as an industry and there's more exciting options now.
Yeah. It's fun to be like, I mean, I've had procedures, but it's really just my own body making stuff.
It does make you feel slightly better. Yeah. Something about it.
It's real. Yeah. It's mine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
What would you say are kind of these trends that you're starting to see that you think are exciting in the injectable world? I
think anything biostimulatory. I think like the move from PRP to PRFM is really exciting.
Can you explain the difference from PRP to PRFM?
So they're both platelet aggregates, but it's a newer way that we extract it. And it's the fibrin-rich matrix is a little bit thicker. So you do see a little bit of like more of a benefit right away, but you're still getting the long-term benefits and even better long-term benefits of the increased collagen and elastin production. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, anything like that is just going to keep getting more and more popular. And I think we're going to keep refining the way these companies are coming out with all these exciting things, refining the way that we use our own stuff. And that to me is
our own stuff, meaning our own
blood, our own platelets, even beyond biostimulators, right? Which are still not technically our own stuff. They just encourage our own stuff to work. But this is truly like spinning your blood, taking it out and re-injecting it into your face, which is exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
I have yet to do that, you know?
Really?
Yeah. I know of
think
all
it's
the things
such a
that
good
I've
option,
done,
because
I have
it's
not
like,
done that.
yeah, it's
Where would you put that? Like, where would you do that the most?
so we do a lot of under eyes. I always apply it after microneedling. So if you're getting microneedling, I'm always going to recommend doing it with PRP. And then we'll inject it to any problem areas, like sometimes in the nasolabial folds, around the eyes, anywhere that we want a little bit more collagen production.
I need to come in.
Yeah.
I can't believe I've never done
such
that.
an easy like treatment. It's
So you're still drawing the blood.
yes, spinning it down, taking out the platelets. And then as I mentioned, I'll inject any problem areas and then just apply it directly on the skin and microneedle it in the whole face.
Love it.
Neck, chest, we do all that stuff. That's actually something I like want to start focusing on is my neck, more procedures. So I'm going to start doing some microneedling with PRP for myself.
Well, let's go back to these postpartum women. Okay. How should they be thinking about their faces as they're losing that weight? Because I think it's one of those times in your life where it's like a rare time where you're dramatically losing that fat in your face. So what would you say? Like, how should they be looking at their faces and recognizing that this is maybe from being postpartum and there could be something that they could do for it?
Yeah, I think first, some of it is transient. So some of it does come back, I think, as your weight starts to neutralize a little bit. I think a lot of women will sometimes lose a little bit extra weight in the beginning and then kind of level out a little bit. But even so, I've noticed, at least on myself, that even at the same weight, my face kind of got a little bit of its youth back naturally. And I think that happens. I mean, you have to also remember you're not sleeping, you're stressed out. So there's a lot of other factors happening aside from the weight loss that are affecting your face. So I think just looking at it with grace, honestly, just understanding that this is a little bit temporary. There are some things we can do, but most commonly I see like people are saying like, I feel like I'm falling forward. Like I feel like things are coming forward. I feel like my eyebrows are falling. Those are like the kind of the key words that I'm listening for when people are talking about this time.
Falling and forward.
Yes, exactly. And that is what it feels like. You're just like, oh my gosh, this used to be back here. And there is only so much you can do with more or less invasive options. I mean, like even, all the filler in the world isn't going to help if it's a drastic
Right.
change,
You don't want to be a balloon.
Exactly. But at this age, that's not usually what's happening. It's just, I think having someone that you trust that you can go see and who isn't going to overdo it, I think is so important. So that's a really good point too, is like something you think about before you have kids is just like getting your feet wet. Even if you don't do anything, like finding an expert that you trust that's willing to tell you no, I think is important. Anytime someone tells you no, I think that's always a good sign.
I think that is really smart though, that you find somebody who's going to be really honest with you.
Yeah, and just develop that relationship over a period of years, even before you might potentially need it.
That is like the scariest thing, is going to somebody after you've had this huge life event and then you're trying to do something completely different to your face.
And you're in like a very vulnerable headspace. And I feel like if it's not someone you trust, you could easily be talked into doing something that might not be the best option for you.
Totally. So let's say a woman comes in, let's say a patient just comes in general. But I think about a lot of the time these postpartum women, because this is when we're feeling the most vulnerable. We really want to see something change for us that feels like something for ourselves. What are those questions that you're asking them? Like, what should they be thinking at home before they even go see an injector like you?
I always give them the mirror and I ask them to tell me if they can, what they're feeling. And I think this is actually the time it's the hardest because a lot of times they can't pinpoint it. It's just like this feeling of not recognizing themselves. And again, I think that comes back to everything else that's going on, lack of sleep, stress, which changes our skin. And I think they're just seeing a multitude of minute changes in the mirror. But when a new patient comes in, I always like them to tell me what they are concerned with. And I know there's like two schools of thought here. Some providers are like, no, they come into my chair and I look at their face holistically, which is also important. And I make the plan, which I think is good, but you have to be the type of person who is looking for that. And for me, I think my approach is just a lot more minimal, a lot more less is more, again, especially in younger patients. So I want to do what's going to be the most impactful for them and what's really bothering them. Because like I mentioned, I don't want to point something out that they hadn't noticed because my eye is so attuned to these things. And it's something that they wouldn't notice, that people on the street wouldn't notice, but I notice it because I look at faces all day. And that's not what we want. We don't want to chase every little line. We just want you to feel refreshed and look at things more holistically. So I ask them to come in, take a look in the mirror, tell me what's bothering them. I also will have them bring in pictures of them when they're younger. I like to do this especially for lips, like, because a lot of times people will say, well, I used to love my lips and now I feel like they're deflated. So show me what did that look like? You know, when your face was fuller, did you like it? I had a provider one time that I saw in LA for Sculptrum. I was telling her before I got pregnant why my face was so much fuller. And she's like, well, did you like it? Or do you like it now that it's more sculpted? And I'm like, wow, I never really thought about it that way. Like maybe I don't want it to be as full as it once was. So all those things, I think it's helpful to bring in pictures of what you used to look like. I think it can be helpful to bring in pictures of other people, especially when you're talking about like minute things like lips or something, but that's not realistic. You don't come into your injector and say like, I want to look like Hailey Bieber. Yeah, that's not how it works. And I think that's unhealthy, to be perfectly honest. So those are just a couple little things I think are helpful.
And then for the postpartum moms who are like balls to the wall, I just want to look so much better, do everything now. What are the things that they should actually wait on? So
most of it actually is safe to do in this period. That's, I think, important to know. I would say the only caveat aside from safety is, again, just think that this time is a very temporary, transient time, and things might seem a lot more severe than they actually are. Like you mentioned, you kind of went in and did everything. So what I would do in this case is be like, okay, let's set a plan. Let's do this today. And I would start with like my basics, get you on the right skincare routine. Let's do a little toxin if that's something you want. Let's schedule out your microneedling if we're going to do that. And then let's see how things settle in 6 weeks. And you might not feel like you want to go and do all this extra stuff. But if you still do, then let's formulate a plan for any filler, maybe sculpture or something like that. And that's really just like more of a mental piece, like slowly ease your way into it.
Women that get stretch marks and they want to do something about it. Yeah. Should they wait till the stretch marks have healed a little bit or should they come in early?
So I think number one, understand that it's mostly genetics. There's not a lot you can do. As far as prevention, there are some small studies. There may be benefit to things like there was one study that showed bitter almond oil when paired with massage. So not alone, but paired with massage, Centella asiatica, hyaluronic acid. So if you want to do a combo of those and really massage them in, I would say though, like people focus on their belly, like do your boobs, do your butt, do your hips, because we know like you get stretch marks there too. Your
and
thighs.
Sometimes it's when you least expect it. It's like you think you're through the pregnancy and then you're like that last week and suddenly you just get a burst.
Yeah, and I think just like keeping things moisturized, if anything, just for comfort, because you know your skin gets a little bit itchy and dry as it starts to stretch. And then after, when they're still red, if you're lighter skin, get into seat for a vascular laser because it's better to treat them early. And then after, once they've turned white and they're a little bit older, then we can do things like microneedling or laser. So there are options, but a lot of it is genetics, whether or not you're going to get them.
Yeah. So the genetics and go in when they're still red.
Yeah, go in right away. Especially this goes for like C-section scars too. Once your scar's healed and you've gotten the okay from your OB, start treating it then if it's bothering you, because the longer you wait, it can be a little bit more difficult.
That makes sense. You know, the other thing is to throw in the retinoid. I tell people
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, like if, you know, I even think about like the retinoids that I've purchased, like retinol products that have maybe been too strong for my face. I never waste them. They go onto my belly.
Yeah.
They go onto my C-section scar.
Yes.
I put them on the backs of my arms. Like I will not waste my retinol.
Yeah, and the higher strength actually does help to treat stretch marks. So start using that right away if you have it at home.
Amy, thank you so much. This was really insightful. I'm sure there are a few moms who are like, you know what, I'm ready to book my appointment.
Yes.
They're going to go see their providers really quick now.
Yeah, good. I hope it was helpful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us on this episode of My Life Online. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to follow, rate, and review, and also share it with a friend so we can continue making great episodes for you. You can also find me on social media. I'm at Susan Yara. And if you enjoy beauty, especially skincare, make sure to check out my YouTube channel, Mixed Makeup. I'll talk to you soon.